Hey guys, and welcome to Pheas Airsoft, where today we're going to do a disassembly and internal review on this JG111 T3 K2 RIS. Hi guys, welcome back. Just a quick point on safety. If you do anything like this, please make sure that you're doing the correct safety precautions, eye protection on, batteries out, that kind of thing. It's important that you look after yourself and anybody else around you. So welcome back. If you do enjoy this content today, please do like, comment and subscribe, because you'll be really helping me out, especially the like button, because that helps me get seen by YouTube algorithms and boosts me up those rankings, and I would appreciate that. So hopefully you've seen my recent unboxing of this JING GONG T3 K2 RIS, and you've come back to see kind of how to disassemble it and what kind of quality is in there. Now, for probably one of the first times ever, I'm doing this disassembly post actually playing with it. I have already been inside it and disassembled it once just to do a downgrade on it. I didn't have the time to film this video. I just needed to do the work quickly. So it was doing about 360 FPS. I've since fit a Garda SP90 because the FPS, the air seal was so good, and I think that gave me just over 300 FPS, about 310, 320 FPS, because the air seal is so good. After playing with it, there are some upgrades and things that I will tell you about as we're going along. Number one of which, the little battery vert grip that comes with it is absolutely garbage, like the cheapest, crappiest quality, unfortunately, I've probably ever seen for an included accessory. I didn't even dare take it out of the safe zone in the end because it was just so wobbly and loose with my battery in there. So in the end, I had to borrow a PEC box and mounted a PEC box on the side to store the battery in, because it was just absolutely garbage, and it wasn't going to last longer than a game. But the gun itself performed really, really well. Steady rate of fire even after the downgrade, but definitely sort of okay. There are some improvements that I'm going to make to it longer term, which I'll talk about as we go through it. So getting started then with the disassembly. So we've got then just our normal muzzle brake, in which it's just a negative thread which unscrews, and it gives us this little rubber O-ring like we saw on the other JG T3, and that's like a sort of centralizer, and it's just there to for your barrel, stabilizer for your barrel, and it provides like a sort of a rubber O-ring for this to screw down onto and tighten onto, so it's less likely to loosen up. I did fix the barrel wobble. I'd noticed that there was a little bit of a barrel wobble in this, so it is just a teeny tiny little grub screw in there, and it was a size 6 grub screw, which if you undo that, this will just pop out, and this whole outer barrel exposing the inner barrel, and it just slides back in again, and all I did was tighten that down, and absolutely perfect straight after. So the handguard then, we should be able to just pop this front pin out, and then just like a standard G3, it is going to come out. Now what I've done is I've tightened down these bolts, so I'm going to loosen these off. They weren't fully tight when I first got it out of the box. I have since tightened these down just because it helps to shore up the RIS unit a little bit, because I did notice that afterwards there was a tiny little bit of wobble in there. So as you can see there, I've sort of marked the plastic a little bit, the same on that side where it's sort of screwed in. I've not gone too tight, just enough to tighten it down to stop any sort of movement at the back there, and it helps to support the weight a little bit. Instead of it all being on this sort of plastic lug, it ends up more being supported by the body and the plastic lug as well. Then your hand goes on it and supports the whole weight of it when you're playing. So if you wanted to remove this front section, then you've just got 4 screws, 2 there and 2 there, and this whole front assembly will just slide off, exposing the inner barrel. But to get to the hop, you've got to take the gearbox out. So we'll come to the back then. Similar to an MP5 almost, you've got the retractable stock, which push a pin and it obviously extends all the way out or all the way in. Now looking at this, there is a latch here and there is another one cut into the underside here. So my plan is because I want it sort of about halfway, I will at some point get a Dremel out and I'm going to have a go at modifying this rail to have an extra pair of notches in there so that I can run that as a mid position instead of just the all way in or the all way out. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the stock as a first point. Put this down because it's not easy to do this while it's up floating in the air, and I'm already clumsy enough as it is. So these two stock retaining pins are longer than the pin that we're taking out of the mag, sort of the back of the mag well. So make sure that they are kept separate so you know which has come from where. That's one pin. There's the other pin. Put those to one side. Now I'm going to keep it on this side of the gun, on what will be the sort of the right hand side of it, just because as I slide it off, there is, there we go, that will just come off in a single assembly. What I will say is if at any point this sling loop comes out, let's see if I can get it out enough to demonstrate to you. Looks like they've done a good job. So inside there, it kind of, hopefully you can see that, it should go in and should fold in. Hopefully you can see that like that, leaving the loop that way out. Hopefully that, it used to be that they didn't hook in very far and it would often come out when you were disassembling, and MP5s I think still do that occasionally. But basically those rods down there go in like that, and that's how it should be, and that's your rear sling loop. Now this is a plastic mounting, so I wouldn't have thought it would be strong longer term to maintain carrying the whole weight of this, and it is pretty weighty to be fair. It's definitely more weighty, or at least on par with the weight with the full length T3 K3 that we did before. So the bit I was talking about then, we've got this little plastic bit here which will literally just lift out. So that's just like a little rectangle with a triangle on the end of it. It doesn't really matter which way over it goes, but it needs to sit with a little triangle pointing towards the back of the gun. There's also this metal sort of spring clip which just lift up to flip it over. So show you that. So that's its side profile. If we gonna focus on this, put that down, there we go. So that's its side profile, and if you look, there is sort of like a latch there, and that's how it sits underneath one and onto the other like that, and that's how it sits with a little plastic bit on top like that. So now that that's out of the way, what we're going to do is going to remove this front pin here from the sort of the back of the mag well, and what this is going to do is it's just going to release the sort of gearbox to be slid out, just like the T3 K3. Don't forget that is a different size pin and screw to the stock ones. Now at this point I can literally just, oh no I can't, it's a good job I already noticed that, remember. So at the back here we've just got like a little pin, a little sort of retaining clip here, and the wires sort of quite tightly packed in there. Now if you are doing this, make sure that you sort of almost take a look at where the wires are sitting and how they're arranged, because it's quite tight for space. Now this, in a second when I pull this fuse holder out, this is one of the areas where I am going to make some improvements, or I will be making improvements. Let's have a look. There we go. So there comes the fuse holder, and there is a mini Tamiya connection in there. So what I'm going to do is, first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull it down out the way, and there is, can't even get the angle right, there is, there we go, look, a Phillips head screw in there. So I'm just going to remove that Phillips head screw. Not quite. Yep. And that releases this retaining sort of clip. Put that out of the way. Now at this point then, I can get my finger in and I can unclip, disconnect that mini Tamiya. Now, this is one of the first places I'm going to make improvement. Now, I noticed that when I plugged the battery directly into this mini Tamiya coming out the back of the gearbox, I had a significantly better rate of fire. I didn't measure it. I didn't have time or chance to measure it, and I might do in a future video. But I had a significantly better rate of fire at this mini Tamiya coming out the back of the gearbox than when connected to this mini Tamiya at the front. Now, that sort of lends itself to the fact that mini Tamiyas are not the best for transferring current, and obviously if I'm doubling up on the number of mini Tamiyas in this circuit to power this gun, then obviously it's going to start reducing the sort of the power that's getting to the motor. So if I wasn't going to put a MOSFET in it, which I am, then what I would do is I would either switch these to Deans, or I'd switch them to something like spade connectors that are directly crimped onto the wire itself for a good solid connection, which mini Tamiyas are, but then the sort of spade and the female spade lock together in a much more secure way than the mini Tamiya, particularly over time. These are the male pins that are just actual pins, and then the female ones are like little tubes, and over time those tubes get wider, so there's less and less contact. So the first thing I would look at doing is stripping those out and replacing them with a more solid connection, which should at least improve the amount of power getting from your battery down at the front here through to your actual gearbox and your motor. Now, I am going to wire a gate MOSFET in it. I forgot which one I'd picked up, but I've got a small, it's not the Pico, a small MOSFET which is going to replace the fuse box completely, and will neatly sit in the back of there, and then run the battery wire from there, where it is currently, back to the front again, to have the battery. That should improve my trigger response, especially if I twin it with a high torque motor, and it will improve my overall rate of fire. If you are looking for motors, just a sort of point of note, which I've not really clarified before, if you want a fast trigger response, then you need a high torque motor, because that will get up to speed fastest. It's not got the best overall speed, but it can get up to speed fastest. So if you want a fast trigger, so you pull the trigger, you want the gearbox to turn over the fastest possible it can do to fire a single shot. So if you want snappy single shot response, then you need high torque. If you want a better rate of fire when it reaches full speed, then a high speed motor would be better. There are some situations where slightly different principles apply and things, but generally speaking, particularly at UK FPSs, sort of 350 and below, a high speed motor will get you a faster rate of fire generally on standard gear sets, but will take longer to get you up to that full rate of fire. A high torque motor will get you a faster response from your trigger. So just to clarify that. So we're now at a point then where this can just slide out. Remember, this being tough. There we go. A little bit of force and it just slides out. It needs a little bit of wiggling, and there it is. And be careful as you're doing it not to obviously catch or drag these wires through. They do move a little bit. I'll just show you. There, they do move a little bit, but they should safely sit in almost like there's a little track all the way down inside that body, where these should sit quite safely and happily without any intervention. Okay, now at this point, obviously I could remove the front end and take that away, and then I've got, I think that's the fake screw, isn't it? Or is that a real screw? You've got a screw here, you've got a screw here, you've got a screw here. You've also got one in your rear sight as well. So one in the rear sight, one here, and one there, I think. Okay. Yes. See, I've questioned my own knowledge now. Yep, screw there. And that should then allow the receiver to split in two, so you could access changing the metal body if you wanted to access sort of anything internally in there. If you're just replacing half of the body, not that getting replacement bodies are easy because they're sold out. I would get a metal one on this if you could get one. So there's the barrel and hop. So that is obviously a very long airsoft barrel, and probably at some point I will improve it, change it. But for now, I think I'm going to put a maple leaf MR rubber in it. I've had some excellent results, particularly on the DMR, that I've sort of built the budget DMR, which is a series of videos coming soon. So we've got the hop. The hop is currently set, as you can see there, for 0.25 gram BBs, and I was getting some really good range out of that. Now, if I turn that hop fully on, that is full hop sitting there. So I dare say I'd probably get 2.8s out of that. Not sure if that would hop a 0.3. I did find the first couple of 100 rounds, similar to the unboxing video, the BBs were sort of a little bit all over the place. Some would fly perfect, some would go sky high, some would just kind of drop out of the barrel very quickly, and I assume that was just the gunk in the barrel. It does look like the barrel needs a good clean, but generally, once it's bedded in, I was happy with the performance. So we'll slide that to one side. I did forget as well, there's an extra screw. You can't separate the body properly without unscrewing this little screw in here, which releases half the mag release, then the body should come apart. So onto the lower then, where the gearbox is, we'll take the base plate off first. So you've just got 2 screws on the base here. One screw. As per usual, make sure you know what all the screws are when you're taking them out. You keep them sort of together, I suppose, as little collections. Nobody wants to damage the gun by putting the wrong screw in the wrong place. So off comes the base plate. There's the little motor adjustment plate. I'm just going to disconnect our wires. So we've got the red terminal at the front, got the black terminal at the back. Out comes the motor. Might just need a little bit of help out of there. There we go. So there comes the motor, just bog standard, generic, unnamed motor. And we've got 2 screws down here now. Unlike an M4 sort of type, the red wire doesn't come up the front and go around the back. The red wire comes directly up the front and the black wire comes directly up the back. And then they just fold over onto their respective terminals. So you don't need to worry about manipulating the wires around underneath the motor or anything. So I'm just going to undo the 2 Phillips heads that are in here. That's one. I'm hoping now that JG seem to have, or the rumours seem to suggest that JG has been taken over by Golden Eagle, in which case I hope they start to innovate a little bit and, you know, start bringing out new models, but I'm hoping they're going to start doing new and interesting things. Maybe a quick change spring on the back would be a nice addition initially. Maybe a little bit of innovation. They've got some catching up to do with SEMA. So the pistol grip then, I'm just going to wiggle it off. On this one, it was quite stiff, fitted onto the side of the gearbox. So I'm just giving it a little bit of a wiggle and off it's come. I'm just going to manipulate that round until, there we go. Take the pistol grip off. So the next thing I want to do is undo this tiny little screw. Now please be careful with these because these can be very hard to get hold of if you do lose it. So obviously make sure that you're A, not rounding the screw off, you're B, keeping it safe. I mean, look how tiny that little thing is. It's absolutely minuscule. So put that out of the way. I'm going to pull the selector out. There we go. And this disc will pop out as we're sliding the gearbox out. So I'm going to lift it out and this little cam will drop out. There it is. In my hand, I'll show you how to fit that back when we're reassembling. And here's the gearbox. Now, something I didn't particularly notice or pick up on before is on this gearbox, I can't even remember if it was the same on the T3K3, there is a notch in the gearbox with a notch in the cylinder to stop it rotating. It's keeping it in position. There's only one on one side, so when you're reassembling, make sure you're checking for this particular feature. If I wanted to change the cylinder, then I could just sort of file this off gently with a traditional metal file or a Dremel if I didn't have that, but did have a Dremel. So we'll get into removing these Torx head screws then. I believe the Torx 10. So I've got all those screws out now, so I'm going to get the screwdriver in the back of the gearbox. I'm going to lift the end up so it's sort of pointing the spring guide down whilst I get my finger in and just split the gearbox gently. Hope that the shims don't fire everywhere. Some of them have. There goes the wiring. There we go. Pick that shim up and put that back on there. So, a few things then that are going off. Lift that off there. Sorted. A few things then that are going off. Obviously, I have downgraded it, and that is a Guard SP90. I'm actually getting over. It's just sort of come back to me. It's almost traumatic. So at the weekend, before I got to play on Saturday, I spent Friday afternoon, Thursday afternoon downgrading this to get it ready. So what I did was initially took the spring guide out and I put in an SP100 spring, a Guard SP100 spring, on that spring guide on its own. I was still getting 360 FPS, which is more or less what it was doing anyway. So then I opened the gearbox back up, put this outer sort of shroud on, compression sort of bit, if you like, used an SP90, and I was getting about, I think, is it 320, 330 with no hop set at all. So obviously I'm getting, it might have even been as high as 340 FPS, which with a bit of hop set, it's come down to about sort of 330, 335, I can't remember exactly. But obviously made a massive, massive difference. That also, I've not measured it yet, and I will do as part of sort of future upgrade videos. I will measure the rate of fire that I was getting after the downgrade, so that you can see the impact that that was having, or the impact that it did have. I can definitely say it turned over quicker after the upgrades because it was firing on a much weaker spring. So very much like the G3 before, the T3K3, it's a fairly bog standard looking set of gears. I have shimmed this as well. Now there was a half decent effort at shimming, but there was some vertical movement at each stage. So I spent an hour just tinkering with the shimming to get the shimming a little bit better, so that the gearbox ran a little bit smoother and quieter, and it definitely ran a little bit quieter. Now if your shimming is too tight, then it can do a couple of things. It can slow your rate of fire down, and it can build up resistance, which generates heat in the motor and the batteries and can cause issues because of that built up heat. If your shimming is too loose, and what I mean by shimming is these little metal discs on top of the gears here, those are shims, so little tiny washers, and they, as you're looking at the sort of looking down the gun, it stops the gears moving side to side. In this orientation, it'd be vertical movement, so the gears would be moving up and down if the gun was shooting on its side. So by getting them shimmed well to each other, so that the teeth mesh well, but that the gears don't touch each other, so the teeth that connect them each should be meshing as much as possible, with still clearance between the gears in terms of their vertical or horizontal positions. It can quieten down your gearbox, and it can speed up your gearbox if it was too tight before. Often with a lot of guns, when there's a sort of almost like a screechy gearbox and the noise comes and goes, it's because there's too much movement in those gears. So often when people send their gearboxes to me for work doing, they will ask for them shimming properly to make sure that they're running as nicely as possible, and to make sure that they're as smooth as possible. So I did spend an hour. I've literally only put about 5 extra shims in just to keep it sort of smooth. There is the tiniest little bit of movement left, but it's less than 0.1 mil, which is how thin each of the shims are, is 0.1 mil each. So they're teeny tiny little wafer thin things, and I've only put about 5, maybe 6 at the very most in there, and then it runs lovely. It runs much nicer. It doesn't even particularly get warmed up. I would expect with the active braking MOSFET in, the heat will generate, but that's because it's using the motor, it's forcing the motor to stop itself. It's actively braking to stop the gearbox turning over instead of allowing itself to naturally stop moving. So that does generate heat. So the gear set then is absolutely fine. The anti-reversal latch was a colossal pain in the butt. So what I will show you is a slight workaround that I came up with. Be careful not to lose any shims. So there we go. There we go. So what I did in the end is, as you can see now, there is a little bit of, hopefully, let's get that focused. There we go. Now, let's get a little screwdriver in here. So this little bit here, that pushes against the side of the gearbox when it's like this, and it pushes this against the I forgot the name of the gear. It'll come to me later. It pushes it against the gear, and it's your anti-reversal latch. So the gearbox can't unwind, which we don't want it to. We want it to sort of keep clicking round, otherwise it can cause all sorts of issues. And techies will know when it's not sat right because it'll make a weird noise. So basically this was too strong and it just kept lifting the gear up out of place. So what I did was I got my needle nose pliers on this bit here, and I literally, whilst it was on the anti-reversal latch, I've just, as you can see, there's a bit of a kink here. So I've just used the needle nose pliers to just turn it in a little bit, just to create a little bit of more sort of less depth to it. And that's, it's much, much, much happier and nicer in there. In terms of the cylinder assembly, there goes the spring. Very much exactly the same as the T3K3. So the air compression is absolutely excellent. It has got an MP5 labelled, spin that round. Hopefully you can see that. There we go, MP5 labelled air nozzle and tapered plate as well, which seem reasonably strong. I've had no issues with them yet. And the air seal, I'm going to test again. Even with the nozzle extended, I mean, it's obviously there is a bit of air leak, as you would expect, but there's very little. I'm struggling to push that piston in there, which is good. I didn't know that. Look, it's a double O-ringed cylinder head to obviously keep the air in there nice and tight, which is good. I'll need to reseat that properly in a minute. There we go, to match that notch into the gearbox. I suspect that might need a little bit. Right, I'm going to seat that now. So in putting this back in, the way I always do it is I hook the spring on, and you want this little spring to have the lowest point so it can go down on this pin here. So I'm just going to put this on the little pin here. In fact, I'll lift this up to show you first. So this pin here, this little spring is going to go on there. That's the tappet plate spring. And what I find helps is that the sector gear is sort of wound back so that the teeth are nowhere near this top track, so it's not getting in the way of the piston. So that for now is sat hopefully right, and I can adjust that in a minute to match the other side of the gearbox. And I'm just going to make sure that the piston is sat right in there, and as you can see, the little tracks here have married up nicely, and the teeth should be in a position where they're ready to meet with the sector gear. I'm just going to push that shim back in. Luckily with this one, the trigger stayed in place. The trigger on the T3K3 did not want to play nicely. Neither did the anti-reversal latch, and caused a lot of issues. And Ewan from a Discord, who took the T3K3 off my hands, bought it, also had probably quite a lot of frustration getting it back together as well, because of those reasons. So put that in there. What I've done is I've pulled the anti-reversal latch open, and I'm just going to push my thumb down on it, on top of it hard, just to keep it in place. And now it's in place, all I do is, I don't know if you'll be able to hear this, there was a click then, which means that the gears turned around enough that the anti-reversal latch has clicked into the next position. So if I hold that now, I can turn it forward as it's meant to go, but I can't go back more than a millimetre or two. So that's what it does, it stops the gearbox unwinding again. So I'm going to put the spring back in. Again, this is a change spring. So with this one then, it's a non-linear spring. So we've got a tighter compressed section in the middle. We've got a few compressed coils at one end and a lesser number of compressed coils at this end. Now, this tighter set of the higher number of compressed coils at the end is what should go on your spring guide. Like that. Just occurred to me now, just a point to highlight. A good thing, it's not awash with blue grease. It's actually, dare I say, nicely greased. You know, they've not gone overboard. There seems to just be enough to do the job, and that's it. So it's quite nice to not open it up and it just be, you know, clearly just daubing blue grease everywhere. So I'm quite happy with the sort of quality of that. So I'm just going to slide this in there. I'm going to do the same as before. Little screwdriver in the back. I'm going to compress that in. And I'm going to rotate that until it locks in place like that. Then what I do at this point now is I'm going to keep my fingers on there, on the piston and the spring guide. I'm going to bring the top half in. Now this is where it gets a pain because the gears need to move. And you might need to get a little screwdriver in there and just force the gears to go where you need them to go. So that has nicely, first time as well. Not quite. No, yeah. We're good. We're good. We're good. So it's gone back together, so it should go back flush again, all the way around, which it has. The gears have all popped up. The trigger is still moving. The air nozzle is still returning back to the front, so it's still all lined up properly. And the anti-reversal latch is still in its place, so we're safe to screw this back together now. Here's the secret to guys. I still want to thank you guys really appreciate that you actually would sort of not subscribe to the channel. I'm massive thing for me. Like, unbelievable. Put a little bit of I appreciate it absolutely enormously. You guys are doing it. If you have any ideas on a super cool sort, go and like, make a good 10k subscribe giveaway, then I would be interested in hearing your thoughts. Comments on it. Our gearbox is now back together, happy as it can be. So we're going to put it back into the receiver. Now at the minute, I'll just pop that out, there it goes. That's the selector plate, we'll keep that to one side. Now this little cam then, let's bring this up in here. So here it is. Now these things are a little bit fiddly, not the greatest of designs, but it is what it is. So the way that this orientates is if we're looking at it like this, and it's going to go just like that into the gearbox. Now this sort of dented bit on the outside, if you notice, not that side, this side needs to be sticking out. So it should really look obvious when I put it in there. You can see it's almost come sort of extrudes out slightly from the side of the gearbox. That's what we want. And I don't know how well you can tell there, but I've rotated it all the way forward as far as it'll go, and it catches on one of the little support beams inside. There's like a little flat bit down there. It sits on that, and that's what we want. So at this point now, I'm going to keep the receiver this orientation while I slide the gearbox in. And as I do that, it will connect with the safety, with the selector, and it's put it in safe, which is where it should be. Now to make sure it stays secure and we're not messing about any further, I'm just going to slide the selector back in. The selector at the base of this brass pole has got like a rectangle shape around it, so that just sits in. There we go, in that position. So it's in safe. And now I should be able to pull the trigger, which I can. Auto, sorted. Move that back round. I'm going to keep my finger on that so it doesn't fall out. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to turn over now. This one's not the best of castings and it's a bit misshaped under there, but I should be able to sort of move it about so that the line points to safe. There we go, it's dropped in place. And then I'm going to bring in the teeny tiny little screw and I'm going to screw that back in. as tight as I can make it go. Now it's important that you get it tight so that A, doesn't come out, and B, so that you don't end up with like that. Now I've still got a little bit of a loose selector there that doesn't quite seem to sit that nicely, so I'm going to tighten that down a little bit more. Better. There we go, and it moves the piece of plastic as well. Happy with that. Next thing we can do then is bring in the pistol grip. So again, the red wire goes up the very front hole on the left. There we go, and the black wire goes up the rear hole on the right. And then make sure not to crimp the wires. The pistol grip's got like these sort of lugs on them that connect with this part on the trigger guard, and we're just going to wiggle that down. We know it's a bit of a stiff fit. There it is. Next it does it, we'll bring in the screws. So make sure that before you start screwing a screw in, you when it's a positive thread, you turn anti-clockwise, so as though you're unscrewing it first until it clicks, and that makes sure that you seat it properly into the threads, because you don't want to ruin the threads by rushing ahead with it. So click and then screw in until it's tight, and then an extra nip, make sure it's secure. Then we can bring in the motor, making sure that the red goes at the front. I'm just going to gently drop that down there. There we go. I'm going to push that down, and I'm going to put the black connection on first. That's one on, and then the red. There we go. I'm just going to manipulate those out the way so that I can bring, first of all, the little motor adjustment plate in. Now keeping it sort of vertical at this point is important. I'm going to bring in the base plate then of the pistol grip. I'm going to sit that on there. I'm going to push that in, and then I'm going to rather quickly bring in the screws. I mean, I don't need to use as much force as I'm using to hold that base plate in. Despite my hand looking like I'm going white-knuckled, I am probably using more force than I actually need to do, but quite ham-handed at times. That's one screw in, and it's already secure, but we're going to put the other one in because it needs to be in there to keep it secure. You don't want any sort of option for movement happening in there. There we go. Those are secured in. Now that we've done that, we're going to bring the receiver back in, the upper, and we're going to make sure that those wires are sat in their little track. I'm just going to bend them over the side there, out of the way, whilst I feed the gearbox in. So with this, it's a little bit sort of almost like a knack, I suppose, that you've got to basically just open the back of the body up a little bit and then wiggle it about, and then it'll just slide in, just like that. In the words of Tommy Cooper, and the wire has jumped its track, so I'm going to probably swear a little bit. No, we're good, we're good. Right, you will stay there. You will stay there. If you do want to see my bloopers from doing this stuff, then make sure you become a member, because you get to see the bloopers. Perfect. So two wires, look, are coming out of that track again down the side of the gearbox. So at this point, what I'll do is bring in that front pin. Oh, come on, Pheas. Okay. It would help, wouldn't it, if we put the barrel and the hop back in. So the way I'm going to do that is just look straight down the receiver, and I can see where the outer barrel begins. Slide that in with the feed tube down, pop that in there, and it just goes all the way forward and clicks into place. Now I'll put the wires back in. I've not even got an excuse for it really tonight. Maybe that is the excuse, is it's night time. So here we go. Let's do this again. There we go. That in there. Slide it all the way in. Boom, done. Let's drop this pin back in. Now the pin itself should go in from the left. It's got these little teeth on the bottom, so it should just drop in, and then we screw it in on the right hand side. So make sure they're going in. To be fair, they will only really go in one way, and you should be able to see pretty clearly from the sort of designs of the holes really which way around they should go. So tighten that down. We're now going to connect up the mini Tamiya. Done. I'm going to bring back in this little retainer. Now the shimming, when I did the shimming, I wouldn't say it was absolutely 100% essential at the time. It was just, well, I got it open and I got a little bit of time. It was worth me doing just to keep it running nicely. So twist until I get the click and then tighten it in. So that's nice and tight now. And then what I can do is feed the fuse holder up in there. That goes well in. Wires. You need to come in there. You need to go in, not that way. That way. And then this little retaining clip comes in to push them more in the way, out of the way. Okay, so I was off camera there just for a few seconds, just manipulating that into place. And there it is, it's in the right place now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of keep pushing that back in because it's going to pop out otherwise. It is a bit of an art form to get it done. I'm going to bring back in the metal clip. I'll drop that back in as we discussed earlier. I'm going to bring the little rectangle in with the arrowy pointy bit pointing towards the stock. I'm going to keep the gun in this orientation whilst I bring that in. That's now in place. I can drop the pins through again from the left hand side going in. These back pins have two different sets of teeth on them. Oops, it's easy. And need to be lined up to get in the right place. There we go. Once it's in place, get the screw in. Sorry, Mike, no Hawaiian t-shirt tonight. Tighten that down. Same with the other pin. There we go. That's done. So nearly there. All I've got to do now is bring back in the rail unit, which I'm going to do carefully because what I need to do is line up the little mini Tamiya, which again I will replace. There we go. That needs to go back forward till it lines up. So it needs to line up with that pin there. There we go. Push that back in. So originally it came out in that orientation, so I pushed it out from the right to the left. I've put it back in, and what I can do is get my little, what number is that? a number 3 sized hex head bolt or Allen key, and I'm just going to tighten that down just until it just touches the body receiver. I'm going to do the same on that side. There we go. Nice and stable again. And we have completed our disassembly, internal review and reassembly of this JING GONG T3K2 RIS. Hope you've enjoyed that. If you have, please do consider liking, commenting and subscribing, because you'll be really helping me out. And if you would like to sign up for membership, I would eternally be grateful for that. It is just 99p a month, less than $1, I suppose, or maybe it's over $1 for Americans. I would like somebody to confirm that. How much is 99p in dollars? And you get bloopers, you get custom emojis, and if you are part of my Discord, I'm going to set up a custom rank as well to show that you are a member. So, thanks a lot, guys, and I will see you next time. Bye.